The reason why God uses the sun, the moon, to let us know what's coming, no false prophet can manipulate these things. This is totally out of man's hands. Not only that, the eclipses speak to every language. What's the best way for God to communicate to humankind with multiple languages, but with the sign that everyone understands in their own language? You only get over 5,000 years, you only average one total lunar eclipse every year and a half. Here we have 4 in a year and a half. In Genesis, he created them for signs. Historically, we see these things happening. We need to pay attention. A lot of the people back then at that time never paid attention. It wouldn't have meant anything to them. But I believe this is revelation that has opened now so that we can go back and learn. It says everything that happened back then was for examples, for us, upon whom the ends of the world are come.
많은 분들이 이스라엘의 메시아닉주들을 위해서 기도하고 싶어 합니다. 여러 가지 어려움 속에서 신앙생활하고 있는 이스라엘의 메시아닉주들, 또 그들의 기도 모임, 어떤 기도 제목을 갖고 있는지 알면은 그들을 위해서 더 쉽게 더 많은 기도를 할 수 있겠죠. 그래서 이스라엘에 있는 많은 메시아닉주들의 그 컨그리게이션, 그 기도 모임, 그리고 메시아닉주들의 기도 제목을 다 모아서 정리해서 또 전 세계 많은 크리스찬들에게 기도 제목을 알려주는 일을 직접 하고 계시는 분이 계십니다. 저는 지금 미국 달라스에 와 있는데요. 달라스의 디오리나 더너 씨를 이 자리에 모셨습니다. 이스라엘의 메시아닉주들의 기도 제목을 받는다고 했는데요. 대략 이스라엘의 몇 군데에서 우리 더너 씨한테 기도 제목을 요청하고 있나요?
I regularly get prayer letters from about 60 different congregations or ministries in Israel. They do it at different times. Some do weekly, some do monthly, some every few months. And so whenever they send me their ministry letters, then I go ahead and run with those.
지금 이스라엘의 메시아닉주 공동체가 몇 개 정도나 있다라고 이렇게 알고 계시나요?
In Israel, I believe there are about 130, 150, something like that, and smaller fellowship type groups, little home groups, which often grow, to larger congregations in time.
그 중에는 이렇게 알려지지 않게 자기네들끼리 몰래 숨어서 예배드리는 그런 모임들도 따로 있겠죠?
Oh, definitely. They ride under the radar to, especially in the smaller towns where they're in religious areas.
지금 이스라엘에서 그렇게 메시아닉주들의 컨그리게이션이 점점 숫자가 이렇게 늘어나고 있습니까?
I get their prayer letters weekly, so there's nobody that's keeping estimates of how many believers there are in Israel. But I can see from the reports that I get in when one congregation said, that they had, 2 people that came forward to receive the Lord or another, and they're not connected to each other. But I'm still seeing that those are coming in. Maybe I'm getting an overview that somebody that's only on one of the ministries' prayer letters is not getting, because they're only getting reports from that person. But I'm getting reports from so many of them that I do kind of see a big picture, and yes, it is increasing. I think in 1948 there were 100 believers in Israel, and now the estimates go anywhere. Well, I think the conservative number is about 18,000. but it is reported up to 20,000. So that's quite an increase.
영화 회복에도 데이비드 오르티즈 같은 사람도 있고, 그러니까 그 핍박당하는 사람도 있고, 또 아라드에도 또 이렇게 예배드리는 곳에 이 정통 유대인들이 몰려와서 데모하는 사람들도 있고, 그런 일들이 아직도 계속 일어나고 있습니까?
It ebbs and it flows. It's been kind of a calm period lately. Smaller incidents still happen. There's still, like in Israel Poshtar's congregation in Ashdod, they had big mobs come out a couple of years back, and it was a big deal, and so but that has tapped down some. There's people that come to there's ultra orthodox that come to the Tel Aviv congregation, Tiferet Yeshua, and they cause problems. But these are ongoing things in isolated situations. Now with this new government that's coming in under Netanyahu, it's going to be a strong right government, which means that there will be an inclusion of some of the religious parties, and we're praying that the Interior Ministry does not go back under some of the leadership that has brought increase in persecution against the believers there. So that's a big prayer focus right now.
지금 보시기에는 그러면 지금 현재 이스라엘에서 일어나고 있는 그 메시아닉주들을 향한 그 핍박이 앞으로 점점 줄어들 것으로 생각되십니까? 아니면 더 심해질 것 같습니까?
They will continue. They will definitely continue, and it will just be it will be up and down. But that's where we can have great impact in praying for the believers there. Because what happens when there is persecution is that it draws the secular people to find out, well, why are the religious giving them trouble? And so that it brings them to inquire, what do you believe? Why are they doing this to you? So it all works to good. But yes, it will continue.
지금 이스라엘에 있는 그 메시아닉주들이 보내오는 기도 제목들 중에는 주로 어떤 내용들이 많습니까?
Well, we focus on the harvest, the Lord's harvest that's going on in Israel. We get requests for everything across the board, even the politics or the terrorism. But the main thing that we hear from the Israeli ministries is prayers for outreaches that they're doing, prayers for specific contacts that they've made with different people, and sometimes they're people in government, so they're key prayers, key people. I can't remember exactly the town in the New Testament was talking about how a key person came to the Lord, and it just turned the whole town. So we pray over those situations, and of course, just the addicts and the outreaches that they're doing among the people in sexual abuse, and the people on the street in the different towns. Yeshua said that the prostitutes and the tax collectors would come to the Lord before the religious would, and so that's what we see happening in Israel.
그런 기도 제목들이 뭐 일주일에 한 번씩 우리 다나 씨한테 오는 겁니까? 아니면 한 달에 한 번씩 오는 겁니까?
It varies from different congregations. Some send weekly, some send monthly, some I don't hear from, but sporadically every 3 months, or because they're very busy doing their thing over there, and some of the smaller congregations are really they don't have enough staff to do everything that needs to be done. But yeah, we weekly I probably hear from about 15 ministries every week, And of course, at the first of the month, I get even more than that.
그럼 몇 분들에게 또 이메일을 보내주시는 겁니까?
My subscription list is around 600, but they're prayer leaders, they're ministry leaders, and they often multiply out from there. So I don't really know how many people get my prayer letter. It's not an impressive number, but it's an impactful number because it's people who care about Israel and care about not just the politics of Israel, because everybody seems to be interested in that in the Christian world, but fewer are interested in the harvest that the Lord's doing. And so that's what our focus is, and that's what we keep on like a beam of light.
본인은 유대인도 아니고 이스라엘 분도 아닌데 미국 사람으로서 왜 이스라엘의 메시아닉주들에게 관심을 갖기 시작했고 또 그들의 기도 제목을 사람들에게 알려주는 왜 그런 일을 하기 시작하셨습니까?
I think that it's something that God drops into us to be interested in Israel. And, you know, I had a long learning curve with it, but as soon as I came into the church as an adult, I looked around the church and I went, wow, this is really great. You know, God is very now, and that's not what I was raised thinking. He really gets involved now, but where are all the Jews? You know, the Bible's full of Jews. And so I could never understand why I wasn't seeing a lot of Jews in church. And fortunately for me, and by the grace of God, he led me to a Messianic congregation several years later, and it just kept building from there. And then I was connected very early on with an actual Israeli Messianic, and so he directed my eyes towards Israel, the believers in Israel. And I don't know, I believe there's something very key about the believers in Israel. Not that all Messianic Jews are not important, but there's something special that's happening with the presence of Jews who believe in Jesus in Israel. And so he really drew me to that. I think it's a sovereign work of God anytime he stirs up our hearts towards Israel.
지금 그럼 그 일을 시작하신 지는 얼마나 되셨어요?
I started, this is pretty amazing, 2 weeks before 9/11. I actually started the Israel prayer summary. And so, you know, then that happened, and of course the world became aware of the terrorism that Israel had been facing all these years from their enemies, and it changed the way people thought. And for me, in that first year, it was really a faith-building experience because, you know, that was during the Second Intifada, and there were a lot of bombs, suicide bombers going off in buses and things in Israel. And so I was getting in these prayer letters from the believers over there who were telling their stories about how, you know, they were on a bus and then they got a blinding headache, so they got off the bus and 1 block later the bus blew up. Or a couple that were walking through the street and they were a block away from another bombing. And so we kept seeing things like that. Of course, we were praying over that. And so it was very much a faith-building exercise that whole first year, and convinced me that was the path, and that was a very worthwhile effort to go forward with.
그럼 14년 동안 그 일을 계속 해오셨는데 도나 씨가 보시기에는 14년 전에 그 메시아닉주들이 보내오던 기도 제목과 최근 들어서 그들이 보내오는 기도 제목 어떤 차이가 있습니까?
First thing that comes to my mind is the openness of the Israelis to the message of Yeshua. There's so many more that are interested. And when I first started, the newspaper people would not refer to them as Messianic Jews. They would always call them Christians. And so that's a thing in Israel because they think, well, they're not Jews anymore. They've become Christians. So it's very important to the body in Israel to be understood as still Jews, Messianic Jews. And so, but anyway, the openness to even the reporters, and now they're saying Messianic Jews. They've understood. They've had enough interviews with the people that have been, like Howard Bass and Ami Ortiz, which you did that great documentary on. They've seen who the Messianics are as people, and it's something that has opened them up to hear more and to be more respectful of who they are.
그들의 기도 제목을 받아본 것 중에서 가장 인상 깊었던 그런 기도 제목이 있었으면 어떤 것들일까요?
I'm impressed every week. In fact, sometimes when I'm making up the prayer letters, because I read through all of them and I start taking excerpts out of the prayer letters and start putting them in my weekly summary of prayer requests. And then from there, I break it down to sort of a synopsis so I can publish that widely without giving away anybody's personal information that shouldn't go out. But sometimes I find myself getting teary-eyed and crying at who these people are, because they live sacrificial lives to bring the message to their countrymen, and even through persecution. So I'm continually impressed by that. That's very impressive.
그럼 데이빗 오르티즈로부터도 이제 기도 제목을 계속 받아보셨을 텐데, 그 폭탄 테러 사건이 일어났을 때, 또 그 뒤에 범인이 잡혔을 때, 그리고 또 그 뒤에 이제 저희가 찾아가서 그 사람들을 인터뷰하고 영화를 만들었을 때, 이런 얘기도 다 소식을 들으셨겠네요.
Yes, I did from the very beginning. The first prayer letter that went out, it may have been sent out by Howard Bass, telling us what had happened. It was several days before the Ortizes actually sent out anything. But yes, I followed it very closely. I kind of have a journalist background, and so I do approach this very much as news gathering. And so I did follow it completely from the happening until the court appearances and the final putting Jack Titel in jail. Yes, it was a very traumatic thing, but it was also something that we could foresee happening. Not specifically, but we could see that there was going to be an escalation, because the environment of persecution was unchecked, and so it's a problem. Anytime there's lawlessness that's unchecked, it escalates, and so that's what we were seeing with the Ami Ortiz bombing. So, and of course I heard right away about the documentary that you were shooting. While you were shooting it, the different ones would write me and let us know that they were good, that they had an interview with you, or were going to do an interview with you. And so it was very exciting, the coverage that you gave to that, and because those are the kind of things that people, Christians don't want to talk about anything like that from Israel. But if we are properly balanced Christians, then we understand, like Paul did, that the Jews are enemies of the gospel, but they are beloved for the Father's sake. And as long as we keep that in balance, then we will not fall into a hatred of them. We'll continue to pray for their ultimate turnaround, because Paul was a religious Jew that was persecuting the believers, but he changed, and he received the revelation of the Lord and was turned around, and we expect that to happen among lots of the religious in Israel.
저희가 데이빗 오르티즈를 만나서 인터뷰하고 영화를 만들 당시에 뭐라고 기도 제목을 보냈던가요?
Obviously, from the beginning, they were really desperate at his injuries. They were so extensive, and they didn't expect him to live through the first night. The doctors did not encourage them to believe that he could even live the first 24 hours. So, the first months it was totally about him pulling through, and the surgeries that he was going through, and also for him that he would, when you're injured that terribly, that is kind of a hard thing to, I don't know, have the right attitude about, the Christian attitude. But so they were praying for him. They asked for prayers for him to pull through that, which he definitely has. And he's been a really shining example of that. But, also they later on, as he began to improve, they turned to the justice aspect, because even though we forgive, that does not diminish the need for justice to take place, and for the person that did that to Ami to be held accountable. And so then it turned to seeking, that the police, whoever was investigating it, would get to the bottom of it, and that the courts would also come out on the side of justice, because it's important for the Israeli justice system also to hold them to account.
한국에도 최근 들어서는 이렇게 이스라엘의 메시아닉주들을 위해서 기도하고 또 그들을 돕는 그런 사역 단체들이 많이 생겨나고 있습니다. 근데 문제는 이스라엘에서도 예루살렘이라든가 이렇게 대도시 또는 한국 사람들에게 많이 알려져 있는 이름이 있는 메시아닉주 리더십이 있는 그런 컨그레게이션, 이쪽으로 기도나 후원이나 재정적인 지원이나 좀 몰려있는 것이 아닌가 싶어요. 실제로는 이스라엘의 그 지방에 있는 정말 미자립, 굉장히 경제적으로 어렵고 우리의 기도가 필요한 그런 아주 작은 규모의 메시아닉주 콩그리게이션이 꽤 많이 있죠.
Yes, well, that's why I cover from the smallest ministry to the largest, and I want to make sure that the small ministries, I have the same concern for the smaller ministries of Israel, because even the ones that are not based in Jerusalem, they don't have that many. When tourists come, they don't go visit them if they are not in Jerusalem. So you've got ministries all over the country. They're important too, and they're all doing the work of the ministry among Israelis, whether it's in Arad or the Galilee or Haifa or Netanya. So yes, I think part of the reason that I put forth the ministries is because they have different focuses, like we all do. Some like prison ministries, and some like feeding people on the streets, and some go to the Russians, and some the Russian Israelis, I mean. And so anyway, I try to highlight all of them, because there's a heart for you can find the one that has the same heart as you, the kindred spirit, and I think that people are drawn to that, or I hope so.
그럼 이스라엘 지방에 있는 아주 작은 미니스트리를 향해서 우리가 도울 수 있는 방법이 있습니까? 도울 수 있는 방법이 있으면 무엇을 어떻게 하면 될까요?
Obviously, they all want your prayers, but the financial support is very important to us. And, the Apostle Paul told us that we were indebted to help them materially. And I don't think that there could be a more impactful place to do that than the Messianic Jews in Israel, because they're really kind of cut off from the church, and they're cut off from Israel, in a sense for both of them. So what happens is they get overlooked, and I can't tell you how many stories that I've heard, especially in the beginning when I started doing Israel prayer around 2001. There were so many pastors that were working regular jobs and trying to do all their pastoral work too. And, we don't hear about that in the United States. I don't know, maybe they do in Korea, but not in the United States. But it's very hard to do all of that being a pastor is a full-time job, but then to have to work elsewhere to feed your children and stuff is really hard. And we need to help them materially to do those things. So definitely I think the financial support, and they're not just sitting around, they're out there doing outreach in their communities. They're reaching out, they're doing everything that they can in the areas where God has stirred up their heart to minister.
현재 600여 명에게 이메일을 보내고 계신다고 했는데 한국에 있는 분들이 만약에 그 도나 씨의 이메일을 받아보기를 원한다면은, 그리고 또 이스라엘의 그 메시아닉 주들을 위해서 기도하기를 원하신다면 어떻게 하면 될까요? 저 도나 씨한테 이메일을 보내면 될까요?
Well, I only offer it in English. I speak no other languages. I'm a typical American. But if they wanted to sign up, they could email me, Donna@israelprayer.com, and I'll send them a letter back that asks them a few questions about where they go to church. I just want to verify that they're who they say they are. They're really believers who want to pray for Israel, and we go from there. So it's pretty easy if you don't get upset answering questions about yourself.
이스라엘의 메시아닉 주들의 상황을 잘 알아야 우리가 구체적인 기도 제목이 나오긴 하겠지만, 이스라엘의 그 메시아닉 주들의 구체적인 상황이 알려지는 것이 오히려 그들에게 어떤 그 보안상 안전에는 좀 문제가 없을까요?
It is dangerous for the security, and that's why my subscriptions are such a small number. I've probably turned down half of the people that have requested to be on my mailing list because they won't answer my questions, and they don't think they should have to. Some of them have written back and been very insulted by it, but I have to put their security, the security of the believers first, and we can't let a lot of personal information go out. I also do the digest version, Arrows from Zion, which takes all of that personal information out and yet gives a synopsis of the prayer request, and I post that online at my blog spot too. So there's that option for people who don't, want to divulge their information. I'm not sharing their information or using it. I'm just protecting the believers because the anti-missionaries want to get information about the believers that they can use against them, and sometimes it's just the smallest details that you wouldn't think that in a democracy you wouldn't think that would be a problem, but it turns out that it is a problem. So I put their security first, and that's the way I go with it.
우리 이방인이 왜 이스라엘을 위해서 기도해야 되고 특히 이스라엘의 메시아닉 주들을 위해서 기도해야 할 이유가 뭘까요?
The Messianic Jews in Israel are part of God's plan to bring to. In Romans Paul says that all Israel shall be saved. The Messianic Jews inside Israel are key to that. And so when all Israel is saved, he said that it brings life from the dead. It's not just that the Jewish people are brought back into their spiritual inheritance through Yeshua. It's also that it releases a harvest in the world in general. So all of our nations are going to be blessed by Israel coming to know their own Messiah. So that is a real key to why we should. I mean, that's the way Paul explained it. In Romans 9 through 11, Paul goes through, and I'm sure this is old news, but Paul goes through and explains what God's plan is for Gentile salvation and Jewish salvation. And he explains that the Jews were sort of put on hold. They were put on the back burner while the nations were brought into faith. But then at a specific time that God would turn back and bring the natural branches back in. And so I really believe that's where we are with the reestablishment of Israel as a nation. And from that point on, it's been the increase of salvations among Jews has been building worldwide. I think there's about 1 million Jews that believe in Jesus now. So as that increases, then it's just going to pour blessings out over all of us.
이 일을 하면서 느끼는 기쁨은 어떤 게 있어요?
It's hard to explain. I just feel like that I am meant to do this, and I couldn't not do it. It's definitely a labor of love, and I feel close to all of them. You know, some of them I haven't even met before. Some I have, and some I know very well, and some I know a little, and some I don't know at all. But I feel very close to them, and I just feel like that they need us. And I want to be one of them that steps up and says, "Okay, I'm here for you, and this is what I can give. I'm not a rich person, but I can do this. So I'm going to do this to help." I would like to say yes, that I repeatedly see in the prayer letters the excitement that the ministry leaders in Israel have for the prayer movement of the Koreans, and that is that in the prayer letters that I get from the different ministries in Israel, they're all very excited about their relationship with the Korean believers, and they're very excited because they say you guys are on fire in your prayer, and they covet your prayers, and they want to make relationships with you. And they see you as a real key in what they're doing in Israel. They see you as a partner. And I read that a lot of times from the different ministries, and I just want to encourage you guys that what you're doing in your interest in Israel is very much appreciated by all the men and women over there in the ministry.
우리는 이스라엘의 유대인들로부터 복음을 전해받은 복음의 빚진 자들입니다. 그런데 지금 이스라엘에 있는 많은 메시아닉들이 어려움 속에서 전 세계 많은 크리스천들에게 중보기도를 요청해 오고 있습니다. 그 일을 최일선에서 감당하고 있는 우리 디오리나 도나 씨의 이야기를 들으면서 우리가 조금 더 구체적으로 그들의 기도 제목을 듣고 기도를 해줘야 되지 않을까 이런 생각을 해보게 됩니다. 미국에 오니까 이렇게 도나 씨와 같은 일을 하시는 분도 계시네요. 여러분들 혹시 이스라엘의 메시아닉주를 위해서 기도하고 싶은데 도대체 뭘 어떻게 기도해야 될지 또 무엇을 어떻게 도와야 될지 궁금해 하시는 분이 있으면 우리 도나 씨에게 메일을 보내시는 것도 좋을 것 같습니다. 오늘 이렇게 또 아름다운 곳에 초청해 주시고 대화를 해주셔서 너무 고맙습니다. 도나 씨 오늘 고맙습니다.